from the Young Turks, huge show ahead for you guys today. Just in about an hour, Bernie Sanders town hall on income inequality. Anna Kasparian is there as part of the proceedings, and we will cover it live for you guys. So stay right here on tytnetwork.com/live to watch that, and then John and I will have analysis right afterwards. In this hour, an enormous number of really interesting and important stories. Cambridge Analytica, that is a group that Trump used in his campaign, in a world of trouble. Not only have they been exposed for the propaganda they were doing on Facebook, but wait till you find out the rest of the story. It is dramatic and salacious, as is almost everything that involves Donald Trump. Speaking of which, is he going to fire Robert Mueller? If he does, what is going to be the Republican reaction? We'll have that a little bit later in the program. And tonight we have an exclusive from Jim Carrey, the comedian and actor. He is in a bit of a tiff with the administration and their supporters. We've got some exclusive content on that in the next segment. So fun for everybody. Now let's get started. Recently, Hillary Clinton was speaking in India, and she made some comments that conservatives are still crying over. So I wanted to analyze it for you guys and see if it makes sense to have said these things, or are the Democrats right in backpedaling as usual? Well, we got a poll for you at the end too. Let's first find out what she said. A little bit earlier in March, she had said, if you look at the map of the United States, there's all that red in the middle where Trump won. I win the coast, I win, Illinois and Minnesota, places like that. But what the map doesn't show you is that I won the places that represent 2/3 of America's gross domestic product. So I won the places that are optimistic, diverse, dynamic, moving forward. So a couple of different ways that you could take that. One is that I won the rich areas, he won the poor areas, and that you could understand why people would be upset about that, both if you're a conservative who voted for Trump, or anyone who voted for Trump and you feel like that's deriding you as not as rich as Hillary Clinton supporters. On the other hand, you could take it as, well, look, some places are stuck in the old ways, and that's why they'd like to go back to 1955 and quote unquote make America great again. So let's see if there's more important context here. Here's a piece of the tape, the audio of Hillary Clinton speaking about this. Let's listen.
I won the places that are optimistic, diverse, dynamic, moving forward, and his whole campaign, Make America Great Again, was looking backwards. You didn't like black people getting rights, you don't like women, getting jobs, you don't want to, see that Indian American succeeding more than you are. Whatever your problem is, I'm going to solve it.
Okay, so some people say, how dare you insult voters of Trump like this? And others say that kind of makes sense. That is partly what they said. So I read what I view to be a funny Washington Post article about how, you cannot say that about Republican voters, that they are looking backward and that they didn't like black people getting rights and women getting jobs. That is unfair. And she's speaking to Indians there and saying Indian Americans succeeding more than you. But first, let's break that down real quick. Steve Bannon on a radio show with Donald Trump as guest, by the way, complained about how Indian Americans were getting the CEO jobs in Silicon Valley that he thought white people should have been getting. And even Trump thought that was a bridge too far. He's like, but they're successful, so what's the problem? And he said they don't share our culture. So that's a fact, what Hillary Clinton said about what Republicans, especially the top advisor of the president, ran his campaign, now of course no longer with the White House, but was a chief strategist at the White House for a long time. That's what Steve Bannon said, it's a quote, it's literal, okay? And then are we really splitting hairs about whether Republicans don't want blacks to have any rights, or they just would like to have them have less rights? Like, for example, less rights to vote. They're stripping away some of the extra days of voting in specifically only in Atlanta, in Georgia. Gee, I wonder why. I can go on and give you dozens, maybe hundreds of examples. It's the party that ran on the Southern strategy. The whole point was, let's go and appeal to what we perceive to be aggrieved white racists in the South and stoke those grievances. That's what the party ran on. Two different heads of the RNC have apologized for the Southern strategy. It is real. They did it. So if you're saying that Hillary Clinton is exaggerating a little bit at this point about Trump voters, I'd say only a little bit if she is at all. Now, it's not to say that all Trump voters were that way, no. And I think the most accurate thing that Hillary Clinton has ever said is the one she's most criticized for, which is about half of Trump's voters were the deplorables who do believe in those things. They do. And the reason they like Trump rather than the 16 other Republicans in the race was because those other Republicans used dog whistles and Trump used a human whistle. He said, I don't care, I'm just gonna tell you. I'm gonna say the Muslims are the problem, Latinos are criminals and rapists, and black people are more prone to crime. He stoked all that rage and fear and anger. So now to pretend to be upset at Hillary Clinton for pointing out things that are actually true, at least about half his voters, and she did say half in those famous comments about the deplorables, I think is a lot of crying over nothing. So Washington Post also says she does seem to suggest that Trump subsisted on voters who were simply, well, less sophisticated or advanced. Now, this I have mixed feelings about. In some ways, it is, again, empirical. People with graduate degrees voted for the Democrat in the race in overwhelming percentages. People with only high school educations or less voted far more for Donald Trump. It's a fact, that's true. If you don't like that fact, I guess you go cry in a different corner, but it is a fact. Now, the part that I'm a little bothered by there is the Hillary Clinton establishment way of thinking that, well, if you were truly sophisticated, you would understand that the establishment has your best interest in mind. And I don't agree to that. And so the other half of the Trump voters who wanted to throw a brick through the establishment window, I have some degree of sympathy for. I don't think they did it in the right way. I counseled heavily against it, and especially with this monster Donald Trump. But they have legitimate grievances. Those are not just about blaming minorities or other groups of Americans. Those are about, hey, my wages have been stagnant for 40 years now. The establishment keeps telling me everything's gonna be all right. Well, maybe it's all right for them, but not for us. So it depends on which half of the Trump voters you're talking about. Okay, now, they went on to quote a poll that was done earlier, and I wanna give you guys a little bit of context into this too. So this is Aaron Blake writing in the Washington Post. The Washington Post ABC News poll, after her deplorables comment, found that more than 2/3 of Americans felt it was unfair to describe a large portion of Trump's supporters as prejudiced against women and minorities. Even 47% of Democrats said it wasn't fair. Well, I have two things to say about that. One, did they ever run a poll, a Washington Post ABC News poll, about the thousands, millions of insults that conservatives, both on air and politicians, have said about liberals? Liberals are this and liberals are that. In fact, I'm gonna give you examples in a minute, so hold for that. But did they ever run a poll on that? Is it terrible to insult liberal Americans? No, they've been doing it for decade after decade. Nobody even bothered to write and ask a poll about it because they think, well, that's normal. Conservatives get to bash liberals' heads in. And if you ever say anything about conservatives, they turn into the most special snowflakes you've ever seen. And they cry endlessly. I am offended. How can you say that about conservative voters? You guys are the pricks who ran on the Southern strategy. To this day, you want to do disenfranchisement of African Americans. You send in Ben Carson to destroy the housing and urban development, and then he has the audacity to talk about how there's something wrong with the culture of those people. Come on. And it's not just Ben Carson, it's Donald Trump, it's almost all of your candidates. To deny that is to deny reality. And the second half of what I'm upset with that poll about is Democrats, come and pick yourself up, man. It's an uneven playing field. You tell a Republican, are you upset that somebody criticizes liberals? And they go, no way, man, hit them harder, right? You ask Democrats, hey, is it unfair to criticize Trump voters? They're like, oh, golly, man, I don't, yeah, that seems a little unfair. We shouldn't do that. Maybe we should give him a hug. Maybe, and maybe sometimes you ought to take out a whooping stick. So, I mean, they're criticizing Clinton on perhaps the only thing she's ever done right. Okay, anyway. They say Clinton also jabbed at white women voters, saying some caved on, quote, to ongoing pressure to vote the way that your husband, your boss, your son, whoever believes you should. Look, I don't want to take away agency from Republican female voters, and I understand why they would be upset at that. Is there some percentage of women who voted the way that their husbands did wanted because they are more conservative and hence believe more in authority figures and the husband should lead and the wife should obey according to biblical principles. You're telling me that phenomenon does not exist in America? That the people who are more conservative follow a tradition, and tradition is you listen to what your husband said. You're saying that that is what, more of a liberal thing? No, that's inconceivable. It's more of a conservative thing. Is it a giant factor? I don't know. But is it fair for someone who lost the election to point that out? That some people voted that way? Yes, it's fair. Is it sour grapes? Yes, it's also sour grapes. It can be both of those things at once. Okay, so what happens now, of course? Here we go. Democrats can't help themselves, so what are they gonna do? They're gonna apologize. Hillary Clinton puts out a Facebook post saying, I understand how some of what I said upset people and can be misinterpreted. I meant no disrespect to any individual or group, and I want to look to the future as much as anybody. Okay, just once, Democrats, just once, don't back down. Try it, see how it feels. So let me show you what conservatives say about liberals. So here's former baseball so-called star John Rocker. Here's the shirts he's selling. Has America demanded apologies? Has the Washington Post and ABC News run a poll about these shirts that say liberals suck and liberals are pussies? I don't see any poll about it. Do you guys see any poll? When Trump, forget Rocker, when Trump bashes liberals day in and day out, when Fox News, his buddies, Sean Hannity, et cetera, bash liberals day in and day out, are there any calls for apologies? Are there any polls done about it? No, it's assumed that that's what you do. Here's a fun thing that someone who follows me on Twitter tweeted. I'm sorry, I forgot the name, but anyway, it's just some dude's truck, but it gives you a sense. I only show you this not because this truck is important. I don't know whose truck it is, and it's just one person. But have you not all seen those different signs on different cars and different websites and different memes? I mean, one after another, right? Liberalism is a mental disorder, libtards, cucks, snowflakes, safe spaces, on and on and on, right? But do the Republicans ever apologize for any of that stuff? Never, never, never. Instead, though, Dick Durbin goes on Fox News. He's the #2 Democrat in the Senate. What is Dick Durbin gonna do? Look, anybody wanna guess ahead of time? You all know, right? Is Dick Durbin gonna roar like a lion? He never has, his entire career, never. What Dick Durbin's famous for is for crying and apologizing for other Democrats. So cue Dick Durbin on Fox News.
Senator, is that helpful to Democrats in 2018 to have Hillary Clinton dismissing the 60 million plus voters who supported and elected Donald Trump, dismissed, some could say even condemned, as racists and misogynists?
No, it's not helpful at all. And in fact, my friend Hillary Clinton is wrong. 30% of the people who voted for Donald Trump had voted for President Obama. Why? The same people who looked for change with President Obama thought there wasn't enough as far as their personal lives were concerned, and they supported Donald Trump. That is a reality that Democrats acknowledge.
So, oh no, Hillary shouldn't have done that. A Democrat fought back against Republicans. We're so sorry. More from Dick Durbin.
Heitkamp, one of your Senate Democratic colleagues who's running for re-election in the red state of North Dakota, said Hillary Clinton can't go away soon enough. Is she right? And should Hillary Clinton go away?
Well, I can tell you, Hillary Clinton, like every American, has the right to express her point of view, and she obviously gets press coverage. But we are moving on to the next chapter in American history. We have a new Democratic leadership and more people aspiring to be a candidate in 2020. It'll be a different cast of characters completely.
No, it won't. So let me explain. So there's two problems with that. Number one, I don't remember any of you guys saying Hillary Clinton should go away when we had a primary in 2015 and 2016. I remember all of you bowing in front of Hillary Clinton, going, she is the leader, she must be the leader. But the minute she loses, it's time for a new face, same ideas, same establishment talking points, but a new face. Hey, Hillary, we're done with you, you lost, we're done with you, okay? So are they gonna have actual new ideas? Hell no, it's the same old apologies, same old establishment. Heidi Heitkamp just voted to deregulate the banks. The same corporate lackeys like Heitkamp. It's all the same people. They're just gonna slap a new face on top of it. Part of the get rid of the old faces meme is not against Hillary Clinton. It's against Bernie Sanders. We can't have the old faces. I don't remember you telling us we can't have old faces when Hillary Clinton was running for the 88th time last time around. You told us to bow our heads, that she was respected and had all this experience, and experience mattered. All of a sudden, most popular politician in America is Bernie Sanders, and he has a ton of experience. Experience, we don't need that. We need new faces. New faces, same ideas though. So now, are Republicans doing likewise? Here's what we went, our crack staff here at the Young Turks, looked up Breitbart.com. They're selling this bumper sticker. Safe spaces are for snowflakes. The chief strategist for President Donald Trump ran Breitbart. Now, he's not at the White House or Breitbart anymore, but this is exactly what Breitbart has been doing all along when Steve Bannon was running it and when Donald Trump quotes it over and over again and loves it. Is there apologies coming from Bannon? Is there apologies coming from Breitbart or from Donald Trump? Of course not. Here's a recent headline that they had on Breitbart. Sorry, crazy liberals. Here's proof that surging economy is all due to POTUS Trump. Oh my God. They said crazy liberals. How could they insult the over 60 million Americans that voted for Hillary Clinton? I don't know if you know this. More Americans voted for Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump. She lost the election. It's not an excuse. The point is, why are you allowed to? You're not allowed to criticize the people who voted for Donald Trump, but the people who voted for Hillary Clinton, you could just go to work on them, insult them over and over and over again. Nobody's ever going to hold you accountable. Look, last thing on this is I'm going to ask you guys this poll question, but I mean it because look, once she says it, I'm defending it, and I think that it is largely correct for all the reasons that I just stated. It is a fair question whether you should go down this path, so I'm curious what you guys think. So that's why we're going to ask you in a poll. Should we care about the feelings of Trump voters? I know that sounds like a setup, but here are the two options. A, yes, it's important to reach out to them to get them to change their vote. That's a perfectly legitimate answer. B, no, they constantly insult liberals and I couldn't care less about their feelings. So to vote, tytnetwork.com/Trump voters. So look, I'm tending to vote for both. Election fraud. We won't have it at the Young Turks. No, look, in the next campaign, should you reach out to those Trump voters that once voted for Obama, that are in the half of the Trump voters who are dispirited about the economic conditions in America? Yes, absolutely. Should you be reticent in criticizing the other half and just guard their snowflake feelings? No, not remotely. And I believe you can do both at the same time. Okay, so. Now, I have one more story for you guys about the Democrats, and as usual, and it's another story where they're running. Okay, let's go to that. Now, we were told several times over that the Democratic Party would get to the Dreamers eventually. Now, to be fair, Donald Trump is the one that took away the protection of young kids who were brought here into the country when they were just underage children. They had nothing to do with that decision. A lot of them don't have any memories of the countries that they came from. Some don't speak the language. Instead, they're Americans. They were raised here the whole time, but they are undocumented. Their parents came in undocumented. But a huge percentage of Americans agree that they should be able to stay and have a pathway to citizenship. So Democrats said, well, when the Trump took that away, we're going to fight him. And we were going to put it into the original budget negotiations, and then we decided not to. And then there was a second round of budget negotiations. That one we're going to insist on it again. No, we're not. No, we're not. But the third round in March, that's where we lay down the hammer and we draw a red line. So let's find out if they did. The Hill reports Democratic leaders are backing off of their demand that Dreamer protections be a part of the 2018 budget negotiations. Say it with me. Of course they are. They were never gonna do it. They're like, oh, come this way, Latino voters, just a little further, just a little further. Give me your vote one more time and then I'll fix things. I know how this game is played. Oh, Republicans, we're gonna fight them. Oh my God, resistance. Oh, about that budget. Oh man, my donors all need that omnibus spending bill to get passed. Oh, the donors versus Dreamers. Ooh, that's a tough one. Tough, that's not tough at all. Of course they're gonna go with the donors. So, while House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders had hinged their support for last month's budget caps deal on a commitment, a commitment from Republicans to consider legislation salvaging the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, they've signaled they won't hold a similar line heading into next week's expected vote on an omnibus spending bill. So what happened? I thought the Republicans were going to give you the vote. Oh, they didn't, did they? Just like I said. You said that that wasn't correct, right, establishment Democrats? Well, you were wrong. I'm expecting an apology. You guys love to apologize to Republicans. Well, they didn't give you a vote, and now what do? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, no vote. We don't need the vote. So they mentioned Nancy Pelosi is one of the people caving on this. Oh, that's interesting, because I remember her pretending to care about this issue a lot. The last time they had a vote, this is what happened. The day before the vote, Pelosi commandeered the chamber floor with a marathon 8-hour speech designed to highlight the Republicans' refusal to take up any DACA legislation. The next day, 118 Democrats joined her in opposing a measure that many later hailed as a domestic policy victory. Two important parts of that. First of all, on the fake filibuster she did in the House, I gave her credit. I said, hey, listen, at least she's bringing a spotlight to the issue. She's working hard to do that, and if she sticks with this strategy and does not cave eventually, then I'll give her even more credit. But as you would expect, and as I've told you for decades, doesn't take a rocket scientist. All you have to do is read the paper. You know the Democrats are going to buckle. They do it every time. They're going to cave because they're paid to lose. It's not an accident. It's not like, oh golly gee, there was nothing we could do about it. No, it's part of the kabuki theater. So that's why I make the predictions ahead of time. That's why I'm almost always right, not because I'm smart, because it's obvious. Follow the money. Where's the money? The dreamers don't have money, donors have money. And that spending bill's loaded up with money. It's gotta pass, it's gotta pass, it's gotta pass. So all that semantics about the 8 hours and stuff, that was just a marketing gimmick. Just so that she could get credit from the dreamers and from Latino voters and not actually do anything about it. Now the second half is as important. 118 Democrats were on her side and fought on that issue at the time. That's good, I'll give them credit for that. But they didn't win. But they said, well, we'll call it a policy victory. No, a victory is when you win, not when you grab a lot of headlines and get the spotlight for yourself and you still fail. That's not a victory. Only in the Democratic world is that a victory. Okay. So Nancy Pelosi now says, wait, now look, quote, it is necessary for us to pass the omnibus to defend our country. In other words, defense contractors gave me a lot of money and my fellow Democrats a lot of money, which I funneled to them, to invest in our children's future, to keep America #1 in every respect, to do so in a way that creates jobs. That sounds like Donald Trump wrote it. We're gonna keep America #1. We're gonna keep it safe. Defense contractors get billions of dollars, and all my donors get billions of dollars. Dreamers, who gives a goddamn about the dreamers? I already got my spotlight. Nancy Pelosi, you wonder why we don't trust you? This is why we don't trust you. It's not that complicated. Corporate establishment Democrats, you wonder why we don't trust you? Because you lie over and over. You give it to the Republicans and you lose to the Republicans on purpose. How else do I call it ahead of time? I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking it. I told you that they'd never vote on this. They're not voting on it. I told you they'd never insist on it in any budget. They're not insisting on it in any budget. I'm right, they're wrong, because I know what their motivation is. It's the money, Lebowski. It's not that complicated. All right. Now we go to Representative Steny Hoyer, the #2 person in the House for the Democrats. All these guys should be wiped out. #1 through goddamn however many deep it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, knock them all out. Why are they in these positions? Pelosi and Hoyer and guys like Crowley are in their positions because they raise the most amount of money. They brag about it. When they ask Nancy Pelosi, why should you be the leader of the Democrats in the House? She's like, what do you mean? I bring in the most amount of money. You know what that means to the rest of us? I'm the most corrupt. I tell all the donors, I'll give you whatever you want. I'll do other things pretending I stand for progressives, but I'll stand for you guys. So here's Steny Hoyer, her henchman, about going forward without any vote on the Dreamers. Quote, I think that's probably the best policy for us to do. It's also politically the most feasible way to get an omnibus passed. Well, you're right. Caving into the Republicans and giving them everything they want is the easiest way for an omnibus spending bill to be passed. By the way, what happened to the goddamn resistance? I thought you were fighting the Trump guys all the way, but here it's their budget. You got some crumbs in that budget. I've talked to the audience before about the crumbs you got. A little bit of this, and they took away chip, and then they gave us back chip in a couple of months. Wow, okay. That's an enormously popular program, but I barely fought on it, and then when I got it back, I declared victory. Okay, they gave you the crumbs off your table. You should be fighting that budget, not looking to a way to make it the easiest way that it could pass to help Trump and the Republicans. Hoyer suggested the Democrats' most effective tool in moving the Republicans to act on DACA is not withholding omnibus votes, but rousing pressure from the public, which polls shows overwhelmingly opposed to deporting the Dreamers, young undocumented immigrants brought to the country as minors. Yeah, but we got that covered, Steny. The country doesn't want that to happen, and you even know that. But what are you going to do about it? We could all be mad, but we're not in Congress. You're in Congress. You have to actually propose this thing called legislation. Now, I know you're very familiar with it when it helps your donors. You pass those right along. Hey, we gotta pass the spending bill. We gotta pass the Republican spending bill. My donors say don't upset the markets. Don't upset the markets. My donors would be very mad. They have all their money in the markets. But when it comes to DACA and the Dreamers or any progressive priorities, legislation, what name so? How do we do that? What do you want? You want the numbers to be high? Even Steny Hoyer knows it. Look at what he said. Our best leverage is 90% of the American people, 87% think this ought to be done. Hey, I was gonna say idiot, but he's not an idiot. He does this on purpose. If you've got 87% of the American people behind you already, that is when you introduce legislation or actually hold up the omnibus bill because you have what is called in political circles, I know you guys don't understand politics at all, so let me explain it to you slowly. That is when you use your leverage, your political leverage, because they need your votes for that bill. But you know that. You've been in Congress a long, long time. You purposely give away your leverage. What are you gonna get it from 87% to 92%? What difference does it make? What more can the American people do to help the Dreamers? 87% of us say, God damn it, help the Dreamers. And you go, well, that is very good leverage. I choose not to use. But if you guys keep doing protests or something, maybe it'll magically happen. I got a better idea. How about we kick all of your asses out in primaries, we put in real progressives, then we won't need magic. Then we'll actually have votes in Congress to get progressive priorities done. Any group that opposes these establishment corporate Democrats, you should support. Whether it's Justice Democrats or anyone else. Get in there, man, for whatever you do, vote in primaries. Vote in primaries. In a lot of cases, these corporate Democrats are a much bigger enemy to you than the Republicans. The Republicans you see coming straight in front of you. When they go to stab you, it's from the front. These guys, oh, we got your back, we're gonna protect. Oh, only 87% of Americans agree with us. We're gonna have to wait, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do about it. We need 98%, there's nothing we can do. Those guys are losing on purpose. They're the worst of the worst. Go into every primary in every state and every district and vote out the Democratic incumbents. So yes, there are some progressives that are good. Look into it, whether it's Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, some members of the Progressive Caucus, Ro Khanna, Raul Grijalva, etc. Fine, but do your homework. And 98 out of 100 times, if you vote out a Democratic incumbent, you'll have done the nation a great, great favor in the primaries. Then we go kick Republican ass, because these guys are never gonna do it. Young Turks. All right, back on the Young Turks. Just a couple of tweets for you. Tough and Confident says, Dan Rather kicking some serious corporate ass tonight. We appreciate you guys watching Dan Rather every Monday at 5:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern, 2:30 Pacific. Catch Dan Rather's show right before the Young Turks. Rory Dennis says, so annoyed that I missed Dan Rather before the live show. Luckily, I have TYT membership. Well, if you miss any part of the show, you know that if you have membership, you can go back and watch it, including Bernie Sanders Town Hall tonight and our analysis of it. Some of it is going to be for everybody, and some we'll do in a post game. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member, and then tytnetwork.com/live to watch in just 22 minutes as that starts. And then one more about Hillary. Disney Princess says, I've got no love for Hillary Clinton, but I totally agree with her on this one. The more progressive states are usually better off. The conservative voters keep voting against their own interest. Okay, now let's go to the next story. So Jim Carrey has been busy doing sketches. He enjoys that, and he's done a lot of political ones. But now people are very upset at him. Let's find out if this is justified or not justified. And then we have an exclusive quote from Jim Carrey for you guys on this story. So he drew a picture recently that appears to look like Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Let's show you. Now, they're not confirming that it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Sure looks like her. Okay, and Jim Carrey wrote in that tweet next to the picture, this is the portrait of a so-called Christian whose only purpose in life is to lie for the wicked. Monstrous. Pretty sure that that's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Okay, so now this is when conservatives get their feelings hurt, and then they cry. So let's go to an anonymous commenter who said, and this is one more reason that I'm done with Hollywood. It's okay to be mean and hurtful as long as it's to someone you disagree with, right? Okay, we're gonna get back to that in a second. Hold that thought, because Turning Point USA, which is a conservative group, went on Fox News, went to Fox and Friends, and Candace Owens doubled down on that. They are very aggrieved, they are very upset about this. There's absolutely no tolerance from liberals for conservatism, they say. They're completely hypocritical in every single regard. We see this time and time again. Went on to say, if it is not Christian-like whatsoever, I think it is a moment for us as conservatives to just look better, take the upper hand, and to say, you know what, you can keep leaving these attacks against us, but we're not responding to it with the exact same ugliness because we have more to offer, more education, better comments. We can argue with logic. We don't need to argue with ad hominem attacks all the time. Okay, now let me be amused by the idea that Republicans and conservatives don't do ad hominem attacks. Let's show you a couple pictures we showed you in another story related to how people's feelings were hurt about what Hillary Clinton said. Now, those are, again, just happen to be on a random truck, but you've seen them all over the place. Cartoon character urinating on liberals, suck on it, snowflake, and it goes on and on. Here's John Rocker selling t-shirts declaring that liberals suck and that they are female genitalia. So conservatives would never do ad hominem attacks. When we go low, they go high. They do it all the time, right? How many times have conservative commentators and conservative politicians mocked liberals, insulted liberals, derided liberals over and over and over again? And anytime that somebody does a sketch of someone, they're like, oh! And all of a sudden they're cry and cry and cry. I guess they need a safe space. That's what it looks like. So, well, let's go to Governor Mike Huckabee, of course, the father of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and see what he's going to say about it. He says, pathetic bully, sexist, hater, bigot. Wait, is he talking about Trump? And Christophobe, Jim Carrey, he's talking about Jim Carrey. Attacks press secretary for her faith. What would be hypocritical Hollywood reaction if he calls someone a so-called Muslim or a so-called Jew? Hashtag classless Carrey. No, but wait a minute, he wasn't attacking her based on picking on Christians. He was saying that she's not living up to her professed Christian beliefs. So if somebody were to attack someone for not living up to Muslim beliefs, that would be a different scenario than attacking them for being Muslim. But with conservatives, you have to speak slowly and explain it to them. Do you see the difference, Governor Huckabee? Look, in this case, he's defending his daughter, so I get it. But it is hilarious to call someone a bully in capital letters because they drew a sketch. when you support Donald Trump, the bully in chief, and to call someone a bigot and a hater and a sexist when you support Donald Trump? Come on, this is a joke. I don't know why the mainstream media takes these guys seriously at all. You should just look at that and laugh and laugh and laugh. So Jim Carrey gave the Young Turks a statement tonight, and I want to read it to you guys as his reaction to this so-called controversy. He said, "I am so gratified by the reaction to my little drawings. It is a job of a political cartoon to vex those who abuse power or enable those abuses. This administration has been lying to the American people from day one while plundering the country and debasing our values. And those who cover for this shameful mobster of a president are putting makeup on a melanoma and telling the cancer patient that everything's fine. Monstrous, you bet." To which I say, hear, hear. By the way, I don't know why all of a sudden they decided to get upset about the Sarah Huckabee Sanders drawing. If you don't know, Jim Carrey does a lot of sketches, and I rather enjoy them. Let's take a look at some more here. That's Steve Bannon. Everybody didn't get bent out of shape over that. And he put a fool over his name, and that's of course Roy Moore. Put danger over him. That's General John Kelly, and I just want to read that tweet for you because it's fun. "All who enter his crooked carnival with integrity are doomed to leave without it. General Kelly has been trampled by his own compromise. Who dares to be next to ride the carousel of fools?" Okay, before we go to the next ones, do you understand why they pretend to be outraged about the Sarah Huckabee Sanders one, but not about the male drawings? It's because when given an opportunity, they love to hide behind the idea of sexism. Now, Republicans will tell you that no, sexism, it doesn't exist. No, the liberals are making a big deal out of nothing, and this sexism is no big deal. But the minute that a conservative woman is criticized or even drawn, they're like, oh, sexism. It's a trick. That's all it is. So don't legitimizing it by pretending that they're actually upset. This is all propaganda. And by the way, here's, if they wanted to get upset, Jim Carrey gave them reasons. Here's another one of Trump. This one is broken. But you want to get upset, look at this one. Okay. He writes, "They bailed him out, set him up, and made him their stooge. With Trump in the White House, Putin may win the Third World War without firing a shot." Hashtag pucker up POTUS. See, if you don't get upset over that and you get upset over a Sarah Huckabee Sanders drawing, you have a political motivation. You don't want to focus on an issue that you think you're weak on, which is that Donald Trump does kiss Putin's ass. You want to focus on pretending that the only sexism is against Republican women, which is hilarious. I want to show you one last one because I really enjoyed this one. Carrie with a Wicked Witch of the West drawing of sketch of Donald Trump. He said, "If you like my last cartoon, you may also enjoy the Wicked Witch of the West wing and Putin's flying monkeys." Well, you're right, I did enjoy it. Cue the special snowflakes on the right while they now pretend to get upset and demand safe spaces. Go forward. Okay, now, I believe we were clear on that. We're moving forward. Cambridge Analytica, okay. Cambridge Analytica was a firm that Donald Trump used during the 2016 election. They bragged about how they could do psychographic information on people on social media, especially on Facebook, and how they could use it to turn out voters. And there's good reason to believe that they did do that and that it was at least somewhat successful. And obviously Donald Trump won, and he spent a fraction of the money that Hillary Clinton did on media, but he spent it largely on Facebook and digital media, which turned out to be a far more savvy move. Now, it turns out there is a significant problem with that. It looks like Cambridge Analytica did not acquire that information legally. Oh boy. So New York Times with a huge story on this. First, they explain the background. The firm had secured a $15 million investment from Robert Mercer, the wealthy Republican donor, and wooed his political advisor, Stephen K. Bannon, with the promise of tools that could identify the personalities of American voters and influence their behavior. Now, at the time they did that, they actually didn't have those tools. So they had to get them in a hurry, and they wound up securing them. But again, not in a way that apparently is legal. So let's give you more background. The firm harvested private information from the Facebook profiles of more than 50 million users without their permission, according to former Cambridge employees, associates, and documents, making it one of the largest data leaks in the social network's history. The breach allowed the company to exploit the private social media activity of a huge swath of American electorate, developing techniques that underpinned its work on President Trump's campaign in 2016. So, it's one thing if you've got legal access to Facebook and you use that in the campaigns. That's perfectly acceptable. In fact, I think that it's pretty smart. But when you illegally get the information of 50 million users, then we've got a massive problem. Their CEO is a guy named Nix. Let's talk about that background. Mr. Nix and his colleagues courted Mr. Mercer, who believed a sophisticated data company could make him a kingmaker in Republican politics, and his daughter Rebecca, who shared his conservative views. Mr. Bannon, who was intrigued by the possibility of using personality profiling to shift America's culture and rewire its politics, recalled Mr. Wiley and other former employees. Now, Wiley is the guy who is now giving information about this. He left in early 2015, but he said they were already talking to people like Corey Lewandowski and about running a campaign for the Trump team even before he announced this candidacy, and they were looking to shift the culture through this propaganda campaign as early as that. And he was one of the founders, Wiley was, and he had worked on Obama's campaign and eventually grew disgusted with how Cambridge Analytica was using the information, and later, of course, they acquired it in illegal ways. That's a different problem and a huge problem for them presently. I want to show you Robert and Rebecca Mercer. They are the ones that gave $13 million to Ted Cruz's campaign. Initially, this information was supposed to help Ted Cruz, but it turned out nothing could help Ted Cruz. And then they switched over and gave a tremendous amount of money to Donald Trump. Later, when Breitbart got in trouble for asking neo-Nazis what the alt-right agenda should be and then publishing it, Robert Mercer pretended to step away from Breitbart and Steve Bannon, and he said, no, my hands are clean now. Who did you give your interest to then? I mean, because you had a big interest in Breitbart too. Oh, I gave it to Rebecca Mercer. Well, that's funny. So she now owns that interest in Breitbart. They still own Cambridge Analytica. It's a little bit more complicated because they've set up shell corporations because of another illegality, which I'm going to tell you about in a second. And let me show you another picture. This is Trump's inauguration. There's that same Rebecca Mercer with Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway. And it was the Mercers who introduced Bannon and Conway to Donald Trump. So they are the guys behind the curtain. Okay, Christopher Wiley explains, for the guys running Cambridge Analytica and their conservative colleagues, he said rules don't matter for them. For them, this is a war and it's all fair. Now you're gonna see some shocking video of those owners of Cambridge Analytica now, and the CEO I should say, that Channel 4 in the UK has uncovered. In just a little bit, I'm going to show that to you, and you'll see that, boy, does he mean it when he says all is fair when they are going to do their dirty tricks. Wiley also says they want to fight a cultural war in America. Cambridge Analytica was supposed to be the arsenal of weapons to fight that cultural war, and it is clear from Bannon's intentions that that is exactly what they were trying to do and what they have done in a lot of ways. So New York Times explains interviews with half a dozen former employees and contractors and a review of the firm's emails and documents have revealed that Cambridge not only relied on private Facebook data, but still possesses most or all of the trove. They say, oh, no, we got rid of that a long time ago. Not remotely true according to the insiders and the documents that were obtained. While Mr. Nix has told lawmakers that his company does not have the Facebook data, a former employee said that he had recently seen hundreds of gigabytes on Cambridge servers and that the files were not even encrypted. Okay, so Cambridge Analytica lying, well, they would never. Cambridge paid to acquire the personal information through an outside researcher who Facebook says claimed to be collecting it for academic purposes. But of course it was not for academic purposes, and they wound up accessing the private information of 50 million users. Facebook Vice President Paul Grewal put out a statement after New York Times continually asked about this issue. He said that they have concluded this was a scam and a fraud. So it is true Cambridge Analytica did run a scam on Facebook. He added that the company was suspending Cambridge Analytica. Mr. Wiley, even though he's now giving information about Cambridge Analytica, and the researcher Alexander Kogan, a Russian-American academic from Facebook. He's the one that originally designed the app that gave them access to this information they shouldn't have. Alexander Nix, the chief executive of Cambridge Analytica, and other officials had repeatedly denied obtaining or using Facebook data, most recently during a parliamentary hearing just last month. But in a statement to the Times, the company acknowledged that it had acquired the data, though it blamed Mr. Kogan for violating Facebook's rules and said it had deleted the information as soon as it learned of the problem 2 years ago. But as I just explained to you, according to insiders at the company and the documents that they have, that is not the case. They did not delete the information. That is now added on top of all the other lies that Cambridge Analytica has been caught in. So now back to the issue of other illegal actions taken. In the United States, Mr. Mercer's daughter, Rebecca, a board member, Mr. Bannon and Mr. Nix received warnings from their lawyer that it was illegal to employ foreigners in political campaigns, according to the company documents and former employees. And apparently those warnings were not heeded. They used Alexander Nix, who is British, on these campaigns. Later they would claim, oh no, even though he's been bragging all across media for over a year now about how they won Trump's election, oh, he had nothing to do with the campaign. And there are other employees from the UK, from the European Union, from Canada. They claim, no, it was our American employees exclusively that worked on those and not those. Look, I'm less concerned about that illegality, but it is an illegality, and so it is one that they're gonna have to grapple with. I'm much more concerned about invading our privacy and using that information illegally, but both are matters that are important. And I wanna be clear, the guy who designed the app was a Russian American, that he is not at issue here. It is the citizens of other countries that are at issue for that particular violation. So now, let me go to the Channel 4 exclusive on this because it is a whopper. So this comes from the UK, and they have CEO Alexander Nix, that we've been telling you about, explaining to undercover reporter all the dirty tricks they do in other campaigns across the world. Watch.
Have a wealthy developer come in, somebody posing as a wealthy developer.
I'm a master of disguise.
Yes, they will offer a large amount of money to the candidate to finance his campaign in exchange for land, for instance. We'll have the whole thing recorded on cameras, blank out the face of our guy, and we'll have posted on the internet.
So it'll on the Facebook or YouTube or something like this, it can be done.
We'll send some girls around to the candidate's house. We have lots of history of things.
For example, you're saying when you're using the girls to introduce to the local fellow, and you're using the girls for this, like the seduction, they're not local girls, not Sri Lankan girls.
I wouldn't have thought so. No, we could bring some. I mean, that was just an idea. I'm just saying. We could bring some Ukrainians in on holiday with us. You know?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. They are very beautiful Ukrainian girls.
They are very beautiful.
Yes.
I find that works very well.
Find that works very well. So not only are they talking about bribes, blackmail, extortion, but they also talk about bringing in Ukrainian prostitutes to get their political wishes. But these guys, I'm sure they wouldn't do anything that wasn't above board, right? Well, I'm gonna go back to Wiley here because he appeared on the Today Show and he said, Wiley went on to explain how Cambridge Analytica used an idea called informational dominance to bombard users, quote, with a web of disinformation. He also said, this is a company that really took fake news to the next level by pairing it with algorithms. And so that leads to the final clip from Channel 4 here in their multi-part investigation of Cambridge Analytica. Let's watch.
It has to happen without anyone thinking that's propaganda. Because the moment you think that's propaganda, the next question is, who's put that out?
Yes.
So we have to be very subtle.
So he says we have to do the propaganda, but we have to be subtle about it so they don't realize it's propaganda and they don't realize where it came from. Well, the people who put the money up, it's $15 million from the Mercers. That's where it came from. The guy who helped to hire this firm, Steve Bannon, that's where it came from. Cambridge Analytica, that's where it came from. Now we know. So final quote from Cambridge Analytica here in denying the undeniable, those tapes. They say, we entirely refute any allegation that Cambridge Analytica or any of its affiliates use entrapment, bribes, or so-called honey traps for any purpose whatsoever. All the things you just saw them say to an undercover reporter. Using prostitutes to try to entrap politicians is called a honey trap. And they say, we routinely undertake conversations with prospective clients to try to tease out any unethical or illegal intentions. That's hilarious. No. We were saying all those illegal things to try to see if we can capture them having any illegal intentions. Well, did you turn them in? No. Then when were you going to spring that trap on them? Or perhaps, just like we can see with our own eyes, it was you who had illegal intentions and clearly stated it on that camera that you didn't know was there. But you did think it was a client, and you told that client you were willing to do all of those illegal things. That's who Trump's team was. All right, I've run out of time here. We got to take a quick break here. We're going to come back with Bernie Sanders' town hall in just 1 minute. Come right back. All right, well, thank you for joining us for coverage of the town hall on income inequality. It is led by Bernie Sanders, but it also includes Elizabeth Warren, Michael Moore. Anna Kasparian will be part of the proceedings, and we'll get to see her in a second for ourselves. The last one was on Medicare for All, and I thought it was incredibly informative. I hope this one is as well, and we'll chip in analysis of the town hall afterwards. John and I will be here, so make sure that you stay tuned for that as well right afterwards to analyze what was said and to add on top. Guys, is the town hall ready now? Okay, let's go to it. All right, back on the Young Turks. We just watched a wealth inequality town hall put on by Bernie Sanders, attended by Elizabeth Warren, Michael Moore, Derek Hamilton was on there. He's a professor from New School, as opposed to the Old School, which is a podcast on Young Turks.
Advantages to both.
Yeah, a number of great guests on there with them as well. So our job to break it down, so let's break it down. I want to separate this out into a couple of different topics, okay? So having just watched the inequality town hall put on by Bernie Sanders, like I said, with Elizabeth Warren, Michael Moore, and Derek Hamilton, I noticed a couple of things that I think are important. One, they gave a lot of stats. I love the stats, and I think they're jarring. I think they're important to share. A couple of times they mentioned the 3 richest men in the country have more money than 50% of the country, more than half the country, just 3 guys. And Michael Moore pointed this out throughout the night, which I think was helpful, that it's not just the Republicans who are doing the corruption, and they are, but it's a lot of Democratic Party as well. And by the way, those 3 guys, well, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, more likely to be Democrats, Bezos a little bit more likely to be Republican, but they're not what is perceived as wild, crazy right-wingers of the Trump ilk, but it doesn't matter. The bottom line is, if you allow for private financing of elections, you will have the people who finance elections served, period. So I love that Elizabeth Warren, near the end, said, let's call it what it is, corruption. That's what it is, okay? And so that is how the system got rigged. So top 10% of earners have 75% of the wealth in the country. The bottom 50% only have 1% of the wealth. Isn't that amazing? 1% of the wealth for 50%, top 10 have 75.
A lot of people.
Yes, and so then Elizabeth Warren mentioned this chart without showing it, so I wanted to show it. Let's go to graphic 102 here. And she talked about how American productivity has been fantastic. And if you watch the Young Turks, you've seen me put this chart up a lot. And I think I said this years and years ago. I think this is the most instructive chart there is. And now it's great to see people in power beginning to refer to it. Productivity has been fantastic for the American worker throughout, including now, but hourly compensation started flatlining. Wages flatline since that chart has it at 73 as the divergence begins, but good reason to believe that 78 and 80 were the big difference, and Elizabeth Warren mentioned that as well. And so a couple of interesting things related to that. Number one, that is 76 to 78 were 2 infamous Supreme Court decisions before Citizens United, and that was Buckley v. Vallejo and Bellani, where the Supreme Court said corporations can give money to politicians, and we were toast, okay? I'm gonna show you the effect it had on taxes in a second, but Elizabeth Warren mentioned something really interesting I did not know about the effect it had on the wage gap and the wealth gap between African Americans and white Americans. So it turns out between 1965 and 1980, we actually started closing the gap, and it shrunk by 30%. So African Americans were starting to catch up to white Americans, which is great news. White Americans were not suffering, they were also going up. All the boats were being lifted, right? And then Supreme Court makes those decisions, and since then, the gap has continued to expand. So, and in fact, Derek Hamilton pointed out that African American families have about 10% of the wealth of white families. It's another set of numbers that I always show you guys. Graphics 104 and 105 here. Average median 2-parent black family net wealth $16,000, and median 2-parent white family in America $161,300.
I'm shocked by that second number as well.
Yeah,
I would have figured it was lower.
So Elizabeth Warren mentioned in Boston it's even way worse. Something to the tune of $247,000 for the average white family, which is great. I'm surprised. That's a nice number, right? Great, wonderful. Average black family, she said, in Boston, $8 in wealth. So what they emphasize throughout the night is equality of opportunity. That's also great to hear, because it's also something that we've been talking about on the Young Turks forever. When people ask me to define a progressive, I say 2 things. One is the expansion of liberty, and so to not just property to white men, but to all white men and African Americans, and to women and the gay rights, etc. But the second part is equality of opportunity. And so that is what the right wing mischaracterizes. Nobody's looking for a handout, nobody's looking for equality of results. But things like single payer healthcare gives you a chance because you're not gonna die, you're not gonna get bankrupted by your healthcare bills. College for all gives your kids a chance. So that's what we're looking for. And that's what we had in things like the GI Bill in the past and the laws that we passed. And one more thing, they all emphasize, and rightfully so, that this is not how it has to be, that we made choices. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court allowing money in politics allowed the upper class to direct those choices, okay, and to capture those choices. But as a country together, we can get back to making those choices and say it doesn't have to be this way. They have free college in Germany, as they talked about in the town hall, but they have free healthcare, universal healthcare in every developed country but ours. And the list goes on and on. We need to make a choice to end the and I love that in a town hall about inequality, they said the #1 culprit is money in politics. That is absolutely right. That's why we've been laser focused on it on the Young Turks. That's what you need. You need an amendment to get it out so that we can fix issues like this and go back to making choices in a democracy.
Yeah, wow, raised a lot of points there. Okay, I'm gonna try to remember the things I was thinking. So I agree, amazing statistics. The one that Michael Moore wanted to focus on the end was we have this idea of what a homeless person is, why they're in that state. And they pointed out that just about half of the homeless people you come across are working. They might be working a full-time job even, but unable to actually afford their rent. So I thought that was a great statistic amongst a lot of great ones. Michael Moore also cited something like 60% of the country, if someone across the country and their family died, they couldn't actually go and visit them, which is another way of saying one of the points that we repeat quite often is that a $400 or $500 emergency could effectively wipe a family out, a significant portion of them. And what he's talking there is about $1,000. So a relatively, what should be a normal thing. You think that with all of the work that we've put in as a society and as individuals over the past 100 years plus, our technology, how our society has advanced, we should be able to go somewhere relatively close by if a person who's close to us dies. That seems like a thing that we should expect to be able to do. We don't vocalize it that way, but for 60% of America, we can't actually live that dream. So you have those statistics, and I also love that they, throughout, when they would introduce each new section, they had video testimonials from around the country. Effectively, I saw right near us in California, I saw down in the South, and all over the place of individuals and their experiences and how it had to do with different sections of the town hall. And I really think that you need both of those things. You need to be able to talk about the broad trends and how they change over time, and statistics can be very powerful in showing that, but you also need to focus on individual people and their lives so that people understand that these are not simply numbers, that these are experiences that people are living right now. When we close off this town hall, they will still be living that. When the primaries end, they will still be living that, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And so I'm glad that they balanced both of those things.
Yeah, John, great point. You almost never see poor people on TV. And almost the only time you see it is in reality shows where they're basically being made fun of. And so it was a little jarring to see people who weren't perfectly groomed, because everybody on TV is polished and groomed. So it's almost like the Hunger Games, and they've got the elaborate outfits, and you never see what's happening in the districts. So in this case, even in the small little videos they showed between the segments, you got to see real Americans, and some of it is great and some of it is tough to watch. And I don't mean that in terms of their personality or character, obviously, but in terms of what they have to live through and suffer through. The stat John was talking about, 60% of Americans, Michael Moore mentioned this in the beginning, can't afford a funeral for a loved one. What are you gonna do? Your family member died, your mom, your dad, your kid, and you can't afford a funeral. What are you gonna do? And you're gonna get knocked out by a small financial emergency, let alone the funerals. Then you got another stat that was mentioned by, again, Derek Hamilton, was 44% of homeless have a job. They're actually employed, but they still can't afford a home. So I wanna show you one of the ways that they rigged the system, because again, enforcing that it's a choice. Let's go to graphic 103 here. This is the taxes. In 1952, when we had amazing productivity and amazing wages in America, corporations paid 32% of all taxes. By 2015, that was down to 10.8, and now that the Trump administration has massively cut their taxes again, it's going to be way lower than that. And what did they do? They shifted taxes onto the middle class. in the payroll tax, that's social insurance and retirement. You see that it was 9.7%, less than 10% in 1952. In 2015, it was 33.5% of all taxes paid, and soon it'll be much greater than that. That is how they rigged the rules. There are many other things, and finally, one other thing that they talked about, they had Cindy Estrada on from UAW. They talked about unions and striking, and celebrated the West Virginia strikes, as they should. Tomorrow on the program, I'll talk about the Kentucky possible strike for teachers there as well, and now Arizona, Oklahoma, all considering teacher strikes. And the reason that they began the strikes in the first place today and back in the day when they originally created unions was for collective bargaining. What does that mean? It means if one of you guys is going up against your boss, you're screwed. But if all the workers unite and they do bargaining at a collective level, then you've gathered up your leverage and you have an even playing field. Without that even playing field, you don't have equality of opportunity, you don't have leverage, and you have no chance. So look, sometimes unions frustrate me from some of the positions that they take, and I think they put a lot of money in politics as well. But unions as a concept where the workers get together and have some leverage to even the playing field is exactly right. Otherwise, the worker has no chance at all. So those are the ways that you unrig the system so we can go back to actually enjoying the fruits of our labor. It's that first chart where you are just as productive as you have ever been, but your wages do not show it. Let me give you two more stats about the differences. The two differences between those lines, let's put up graphic 102 one more time. There's two stark, amazing facts about this. The difference between the two lines in that span of time is about $12 trillion. That's $12 trillion of wealth that has been taken away from the American worker and redistributed to the top. So, they talk about class warfare whenever the middle class fights back. But when the upper class rigs the rules on their behalf and takes $12 trillion from you, they don't call it class warfare, but it was. And one more amazing stat about that. If our productivity had kept up with if our wages had kept up with our productivity, on average, the average American would be making $17,000 more per year.
They could use it.
Wow, imagine that.
Yeah, it seems like it's class warfare when it's Occupy Wall Street, when the actual workers are in the streets demanding what they deserve. That's class warfare. But when the elites are engaging in shadow warfare over the course of decades, behind the scenes where we can't actually see them and doing far more damage, that's just the way things are supposed to be. I wanted to say, and I apologize for my voice, by the way, I've been sick for seemingly forever, but the job continues. What I love is about exactly how they composed the panel. They didn't have every sort of group represented, but they did a very good job of having both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are two politicians who are doing the right things, actually in power. You have Michael Moore, who people love, over the past couple of years, people love to attack Michael Moore. And look, I don't agree with Michael Moore on everything. He's an outspoken guy and sometimes he says kind of crazy things. But on a number of the most important issues, he has been out front in a way that I don't think anyone else, certainly in Hollywood, perhaps anyone else in media has been for decades at this point. I mean, some of his movies on the military-industrial complex, on healthcare, on guns, for instance, way ahead of society in some cases, and certainly the politicians. And so I'm glad that he was involved as well. And then you have Derek Hamilton representing the academics, and that's another group that you're not supposed to trust anymore. You've been trained to think that they're all elitists and blah blah blah. But look what he had, not just great information and great stats, but amazing ideas. I mean, that's one of the things I want to focus on this year is not just driving home the need for some of these big profile issues that we are aware of, but also the smaller things. I mean, he had some amazing concepts that aren't even a part of the conversation, but should be. And then they brought in the people from around the country who are actually working in these areas every day, whether as the head of a union or working in some sort of like rural development area and things like that. The people are doing the actual work day to day, and that is great. You can't just have members of the media. You can't just have any one group. It has to be a coming together.
Okay, so I want to just point out a couple of quick things here, make one more point, and then we're going to continue the conversation. I thought they had great, I have more numbers for you that were fantastic, I think, from that. And they named names, I love that.
Oh, they did.
I mean, so it was really bold. I want to talk about that a little bit more for in the post game for the members, because the members make this possible. So we really appreciate that. tytnetwork.com/join to become a member, get all the post games and get all of the show, any part that you missed, anytime without commercials. But before we do that, and before I make the final point here, I just wanted to check in on two things. One is, Michael Moore kept talking about you got to vote in primaries. If the corporate Democrats are not representing you, take them out. Well, lucky for you guys, we've been talking about that for a long time here as well. And I want to give you guys an opportunity, as always, to participate. Allison Hartz is running against Dianne Feinstein. Feinstein voted for the Bush tax cuts that gave us this inequality. She voted to repeal the estate tax. She voted for the Iraq war, and the list goes on and on. So we're not asking you for money in this case. We're asking you to volunteer. And you don't have to just be in California. You can make phone calls from anywhere in the country, okay? So let's go to AllisonHartson.com/now. Okay, I want to get to 2,000 volunteers there, okay? So it's at 1,283 volunteers right now. But AllisonHartson.com/now, okay, to volunteer. And it only takes 15 seconds to sign up. And all you got to do is make one phone call. And it still makes a giant, giant difference. And then I want to check in on our friend in Kansas, Brent Welder. This is tytkansas.com, tytkansas.com. Brent Welder is a TYT member, and he's up 7 points on the Republican incumbent right now, Kevin Yoder. So if he can get to 50,000, he can hire a field team, knock on doors, and put Yoder away and pick up that seat, not just for the Democratic Party, but for true progressives. He also volunteered for Wolfpack. So BrentWelder.com is his website, tytkansas.com to contribute there. His small dollar donations are killing Yoder's. Allison Hartson's small dollar donations, we'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but she got more small dollar donations than Dianne Feinstein, the legendary Dianne Feinstein, with all of her 50 years of experience and her giant fundraising base. Plus, a state senator that people think is her main challenger. She got more than those two combined in small dollar donations.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so tomorrow night we're going to cover the Illinois primary for you guys right after the show. tytnetwork.com/live.
That's a big
huge elections there. Daniel Biss running for governor against the billionaire Pritzker. So that is the control of the Democratic Party in Illinois. It is monumental. There's 4 Justice Democrats up. You saw what happened with Rick Trevino. Anything can happen on election night.
Anything can happen.
That's right. So we're going to cover that for you tomorrow night. Now I wanted to make one more point here about the town hall tonight. So let's address the elephant in the room about the inequality town hall. And I mean, let's keep it real, okay?
I know what you're gonna say.
Okay, you do?
I think I do.
Okay, no, I'm not sure you do. Okay, so let's have fun and find out.
Okay.
Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are in the same room. Okay, that's actual unity. And they are alleged to, that's not what you thought, right?
No.
That's okay.
In the post game, I will talk about what I thought you were about to say.
Okay, tytnetwork.com/join to get that post game. So seriously, those are 2 giant presidential contenders, arguably the top 2. And they chose to do a town hall together anyway. That's great, that's phenomenal. And I think a lot of standard politicians would have been like, and by the way, more credit in this case, I don't know, man, they both deserve amazing credit. I was gonna say more credit to Elizabeth Warren because she's willing to go to Bernie Sanders' town hall event.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of other politicians were like, no, if I don't get top billing, there's no way I'm gonna go. I know, but that's 98% of them, right? And so great credit to her for showing up. Great credit to Bernie Sanders for inviting what other people considered to be other top contender for the presidential race.
That's true.
Yeah, so great job by them in showing real unity for progressives, not the fake unity where we just bow our heads to the establishment. And it was bold and courageous on both of their parts. And the other thing is, I know that the production values are not great there. They're holding it in a government building.
Yeah.
It's Bernie's staff that I believe, and the congressional staff that's putting it together, right?
And it's hard.
Yeah, and it's super hard, and they're not in the TV business. They're not in media business overall. Sometimes it'll take the wrong cameras. Some of the tape is a little rough, etc. But you know what? That, in my mind, even more credit to them. Because a lot of politicians will not show up to something unless there's a ton of gloss and a ton of polish and everything looks perfect. Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, they're like, I don't care. Let's just go in a room, okay? Let's talk about the issues. Let's give people both the stats and the real human beings that it affects and show it to them. They never get to see it. They brought in an expert to talk about the devastation in rural Alabama and how the UN had to come in and say, we've never seen this in a developed country, and these people need to be helped, and talked about how open sewage is next to the schools, etc. Those are uncomfortable topics, but they had those uncomfortable conversations in a relatively plain room, as they did with the same thing for the Medicare for All town hall. It was just bold and courageous and different and eye-opening in so many different ways. So I really respect both of them for doing that.
Yeah, totally. On the Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, it is interesting. I mean, as of right now, Elizabeth Warren is saying that she's not running for president, and Bernie Sanders isn't really talking about it, but he's got a book coming out the day after the election, so you can do the math on that one. But if they do both run, it is going to be interesting to see how they run against each other, since, based on their policies, they appeal to a lot of the same sort of people, at least it seems like they would. And they have a long history of working together in a very cordial sort of relationship, and so that will be interesting. I hope that works without either of them needing to sort of attack the other, because I kind of don't want to see that. It's like seeing like your parents attack each other, which I also had to go through growing up. And then on the other thing, so the production value and all that, like it's going to be watched on the internet. I think people are more understanding of that now. I don't think they care about that. I think they care about the substance, which is good. I tweeted during the program that CNN surprisingly had a headline bar on the front page of their website saying, click here to watch this town hall with Bernie Sanders and all that. And you could watch it right on their thing. I thought that's great. And CNN has done town halls with Bernie Sanders, but they've been like with Rick Santorum debating single payer healthcare or something like that, which is good. That is something. I'm glad they were doing that. I hope that they continue doing that. But there is no reason that CNN couldn't have hosted this town hall with the exact same panel. It would have gotten tons of viewers. It would have looked better. In the end, it doesn't really matter. But CNN, I think, is missing, like all of them are, they're missing real opportunities to do something different than what they're doing now. And we know better than perhaps anyone what is likely to happen to those channels in the next 5-10 years. And they don't seem to see it coming. They think, oh, well, if we just poof up Wolf Blitzer's hair a bit more, and if we throw a couple more LCD screens, then we're gonna be fine. The kids will start watching. But I don't think that's the case. I think that people wanna see things like this, and they're really missing an opportunity to do it.
Yeah, so finally, look, obviously them being in the same room leads to one other piece of conjecture, which is maybe they don't run against each other. Maybe they run together. Okay, and so that's one possibility. But the other possibility, by the way, is an idea that I've championed, and I think a lot of people that I've talked to behind the scenes seem to think is maybe not such a bad idea, which is a shadow cabinet. So imagine if Bernie is running and Elizabeth Warren really is not running, which she said she's not.
She says.
But all politicians have to say that, and I'm not saying that derisively. She's running for Senate in Massachusetts. It's bad form to tell people you're going to run for president, et cetera, right? And even Bernie's not saying that he's running for president right now, even though, let's keep it real, right? So, I'm not blaming her for that at all. I'm saying, so let's assume she's not running. Could you imagine if Bernie said, if I win, she's the Treasury Secretary?
Yeah.
Okay, as a progressive, I love that.
Oh, and we can go down the line.
Exactly.
But here's my attorney general. Maybe look in Philly somewhere. Maybe we find somebody.
Maybe a guy named Krasner.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great idea.
Yeah, and look, I asked Al Gore on this show. He said no, but that's just the first volley.
Wait, said no to?
I said, what if somebody were to offer you Secretary of State, to be the anti-Tillerson, to bring back Paris and then some?
I'll take head of the EPA, Al Gore. I'll take Secretary of Energy, Al Gore.
Secretary of State, Secretary of State.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
And we actually fight climate change. Imagine these progressive all-stars with no apologies. Oh, but what will Fox News say? I can't wait. I can't wait for what they're going to say. And every time they attack these people, oh, but Elizabeth Warren will take on the big banks too much. Come and get some. Right? They will accidentally be doing us a favor by publicizing those things.
That's true. Yeah.
So I don't want to get over exuberant here, but I think that seeing them in the same room, fighting on the same issue, fighting together on that, was great, and I hope, and I don't know, I have no inside information, but I hope perhaps a sign of things to come.
Interesting.
Okay, so now we got a lot more. So for the members, please stay. If you're not a member, it's a great way to support a show that has been supporting these town halls and and a way of thinking about this and the progressive movement throughout tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. And if you do it right now, you'll get to see the post game and the rest of the show, of course, as well as every show. So we'll see you guys over there.